I stood at her grave long after the others had gone. Margaret and Kemper. The name etched in simple granite, the kind she would have chosen, nothing ornate, just her name and the word beloved. That morning, the air at Oakwood Cemetery clung to the skin. Cold but not biting. The kind of silence only a graveyard keeps. My only good suit hung loose on my frame. Navy blue, same one I wore when they pinned the Bronze Star to my chest. I didn't want to be seen. I wanted to be with her, just for a little longer. I was whispering something to her, something about the first house we built, when Boots approached from behind. The steps were young. Too quick. No pause before the voice came. "I'm sorry, sir, but you're under arrest for trespassing during a funeral service." I turned my head slowly. Young officer. His badge caught the light. He didn't wait for a reply. He looked past me, not at me. As if I were clutter. Earlier this year, at the VFW hall, a stranger had accused me of faking my injuries. He said the war was full of liars. I didn't speak. Just sat down, unbuckled my leg, and set it on the table. Let the silence carry the weight. Now, I just looked at this young man with the cuffs in his hand. Let me know your thoughts. I enlisted in 1972. Just after high school. No farewell party. No letters to pack. I took a bus to the recruiting station with a half-worn pair of boots and a mind quiet from too much stillness. Back then, the war was still cooling, but there was always another fire somewhere. That's how it works. One conflict ends. Another waits. They sent me to Fort Benning, then to Germany. After that, Africa. Then the Middle East. My orders came in brown envelopes. I stopped asking questions after the second tour. My job was never to understand. It was to complete. In '83, I was in Beirut. Our convoy hit a pressure plate IED outside an aid station. Blew the rear Humvee into a ditch. I was in the front vehicle. Still don't remember the sound, just the wind being knocked out of me. Then screaming. Smoke. I ran toward it. I don't remember choosing to. Just moved. 3 men were trapped. Jameson, Hardy, and Alvarez. Jameson had a piece of rebar through his thigh. I got him out first. Alvarez couldn't see, his eyes bloodied shut. I carried him by the vest. Hardy was the youngest. Still called me Sergeant like it meant something. His ribs were crushed. I dragged him last. Then the flames came. The medal came after that. Bronze Star. I never wore it outside the ceremony. It's still in the top drawer of Margaret's dresser, behind her old sewing scissors. A year later, I stepped on something that shouldn't have been there. Fragmentation mine. Took most of my lower leg and some of the skin off my back. Woke up in Landstuhl. The surgeon said I was lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt less. Less weight. Less noise in my body. Less man. They sent me home with a prosthetic and a medical discharge. 34 years old. Still strong, but only on the outside. I met Margaret at a community meeting about water lines. I was complaining to the town engineer. She stepped in, told me off, politely. Said maybe I could use my hands for building instead of blame. I asked her to coffee 2 days later. We didn't talk much on that first date. But she laughed once, and I knew. We married in '81. Bought a house with peeling paint and a sloped kitchen floor. I started framing houses. It was work I could understand. A level doesn't lie. You measure, you saw, you build something that doesn't fall. Our kids came 2 years apart. First Daniel, then Ruth. I was never a loud father, but I showed up. Every game, every concert. Margaret did the rest: homework, lunch boxes, hugs. She was good at that. After dark, she'd sit beside me on the porch. Her hand always found mine. When I woke up from the nights, the dreams I don't talk about, she'd be there. No questions, just presence. She never asked me for more than I could give. I gave her everything I had. Then came the diagnosis. Ovarian. Stage 3. It started with fatigue, then pain. By the time the scan confirmed it, she was already weaker. We fought it. Chemo. Rounds of it. I sold my truck for the first treatment cycle. She apologized. I told her I'd sell the roof off the house if it bought us more time. 3 years. That's how long she fought. Through the weight loss, the hair falling out, the days she couldn't hold down food. She never complained. Even when she couldn't walk to the bathroom alone. I carried her. I learned to cook soup and count pills. Learned to be still with her when she wanted silence. The hospice bed came in late spring. She called me over the first night and asked if I'd be okay. I lied. Told her I would be. She smiled. Said, "You've always done the right thing, even when it cost you." She passed on a Sunday morning. The light was soft on the quilt. Her hand was in mine. I felt the last breath, and then, nothing. Not a sound. Not a cry. Just the weight of an entire world leaving the room. It's been 5 months. People think grief is loud. It isn't. It's a hum. It lives in the corners. In the empty side of the bed. In the way I still fold towels the way she liked them. It's in the silence after a joke, when you turn to share it, and no one's there. I don't talk about the war anymore. I don't talk much at all. Except to her. At the grave. I go every week. Bring her yellow flowers. Sit in silence. Some days I talk. Some days I just stay. It's the only place I still feel like I belong. That morning, I stayed longer than the others. After the folding chairs had been stacked, after the minister nodded and stepped away. Even after our children left, gently urging me to rest. I told them I would. I lied. The sun had shifted by the time I realized how long I'd been standing. The cemetery had emptied. All that remained were petals blown loose from the wreaths and the soft shape of Margaret's name in stone. I sat on the bench near her grave. My legs don't last long without rest these days. The prosthetic pinches when I stand too long, and the other leg isn't strong enough to carry both of us. So I sat. Said a few things out loud, though no one would have heard. Told her about Ruth's dress, about how Daniel held his composure. About the wind. I must have dozed off. Or just slipped into that stillness grief carves inside you. When I opened my eyes, there was a man standing a few yards away. Young. Fit. In a pressed uniform. "You're not supposed to be here, sir," he said. Not unkindly. Just flat. Like a man reciting policy. "I'm here for my wife," I replied. "She's buried here?" I nodded toward the fresh grave. "This morning." He didn't look. Just checked his watch. "Cemetery closes at dusk. You're past visiting hours." I didn't realize. "I'm not causing trouble. Just saying goodbye." His jaw moved like he was chewing on the words. "I understand. But rules are rules. I'll have to ask you to leave." I pushed myself up. Slowly. The stiffness made my hand tremble slightly against the bench. He watched, impatient. When I steadied, I looked him in the eye. 5 more minutes. That's all. He frowned. His nameplate said Morrison. "I'm sorry, but I've already reported it." Protocol requires you to leave immediately. I nodded. Tried to move. My leg caught slightly on the gravel. That's when he reached for the radio. Called in for backup. Possible non-compliance, I heard him say. I wasn't trying to be defiant. I just needed to gather myself. But I suppose from where he stood, all he saw was a man not following orders. That uniform makes some men hear defiance when it's only delay. 2 squad cars arrived. Lights flashing, though there was no emergency. The other officers were younger than Morrison. They moved quickly, confidently, circling me like they'd trained for this. Sir, you need to stand and place your hands behind your back. I stood. Slowly. Arthritis in the right knee, phantom pain in the left. I tried to comply, but my movements are not fast anymore. Not precise. One of them stepped forward and took my arm, hard. I'm cooperating, I said. Then move faster, one of them snapped. My heart beat against my ribs like it wanted to run. But my body stayed still. The cuffs came out. I didn't resist. As they fastened the cold metal around my wrists, I looked over my shoulder. Her name was still visible from where I stood. Margaret and Kemper. The same cuffs they used on vagrants. Thieves. They clicked shut around my wrists like I'd stolen something. Maybe I had. 5 minutes of silence I wasn't permitted to have. I was led toward the squad car. Morrison walked a few steps behind. The others didn't speak to me. I'm not sure they even saw me. One of them shouted something about resisting. I stumbled, because my prosthetic caught on the edge of a root. I didn't fall. But they took it as a threat. The taser came next. A yellow flash. Pain that blurred the edges of my vision. It wasn't the worst pain I've felt. But it cut through something else, through what dignity I had left. I dropped to one knee. The same one that still held the memory of combat zones. It buckled under the weight of grief and voltage. They barked more orders. I didn't hear them. Just the buzzing in my ears, and the quiet voice in my head saying, Margaret would hate this. The cemetery was quiet again. Except now, there were murmurs. I saw a woman near the gates, Mrs. Chen, who runs the corner market. Her face pale. Her phone to her ear. The last thing I saw before they pulled me upright was a fallen rose petal clinging to the toe of my shoe. I don't remember how long I was on the ground. Could have been seconds, maybe more. Pain disorients a man in his 70s differently than it does a young one. My chest burned. My arms twitched. But I was still breathing. They pulled me to my feet roughly, one officer on each side. The cuffs bit harder now. Morrison barked something to them, procedural, distant. As if I were a job, not a man. Across the road, a small group had gathered. Nothing loud. Just bystanders. Faces I didn't recognize. Except one. Mrs. Chen. She ran the corner market where I bought flowers every Thursday for Margaret. Chrysanthemums if they had them. Daisies if not. She knew. She always asked how Margaret was doing, even when Margaret no longer left the house. Now, she was holding her phone. Her eyes locked on me. She wasn't crying. Just watching, like something inside her had hardened. I didn't know at the time, but she made the first call. Then the second. Then the third. Word travels fast through the right channels. The old ones. The ones we veterans build over years, not of rank or regulation, but of memory and promise. One of the men she called was Tommy Rodriguez. A young Marine, maybe early 30s. We'd met once at the VFW hall. He was quiet, sharp. Some kid at the bar was mouthing off, accusing me of lying about my service. I didn't argue. I just unstrapped my leg and placed it on the table. Nothing else needed saying. Tommy had been sitting at the next table. Didn't speak then, either. Just nodded once, eyes sharp. Now he was 3 blocks away, ironing his blues when the call came. Mrs. Chen's voice didn't shake. "It's Roland," she said. "Oakwood. The police have him." Tommy didn't ask why. Didn't ask how. Just hung up and opened his phone again. 6 more calls. One to his unit's group chat. The others direct. The message was simple: a brother needs us. That's all it takes. They arrived together. 7 in total. Dress blues. No sirens, no shouting. Just silence and purpose. They parked at the edge of the cemetery and walked in formation. Boots crisp on the gravel. No announcement. No signs. Just 7 Marines crossing the threshold of Oakwood Cemetery as if entering a place of reverence and confrontation. Officer Morrison looked up first. Confused. Then wary. Tommy led them. He stopped several feet away. Didn't touch his belt. Didn't raise his voice. "What's going on here?" he asked Morrison. Calm. Measured. Private property after hours. Subject refused to leave. Became non-compliant, Morrison replied, his tone now shifting, uncertain. Tommy's eyes moved from Morrison to me. His gaze didn't linger on the handcuffs, or the bruises. Just met mine and held there. "His name is Sergeant First Class Roland Kemper. Bronze Star. 20 years service. He's here because his wife was buried here this morning. He's not trespassing. He's mourning." Morrison swallowed. "That's not what we were told." Tommy turned. Nodded to one of the others, who stepped forward with a printed document. Authorization from the cemetery director. Roland Kemper's name. Visitation permitted through dusk. Morrison took the paper, reading slower than he wanted us to see. "You made a mistake," Tommy said quietly. "We all do. But this one needs fixing. Now." I stood still, my body swaying slightly. One of the Marines moved beside me. Gently touched my elbow. I flinched, reflex, but he just steadied me. Like a comrade would, not a cop. Morrison fumbled with the cuffs. His hands shook a little. The key slipped once. When the metal fell away, I didn't move. Couldn't. My arms ached from the restraint, my knees from the fall. But more than that, I felt, watched. Not in a humiliating way. In a remembering way. These men, Tommy and the others, they knew what this meant. They understood what silence costs. Tommy looked at me. "We'll take it from here, Sergeant." I nodded. Couldn't speak. My voice was gone. My breath came in little pulls. They didn't salute. Didn't need to. They formed around me. 2 at my sides. 1 behind. 4 ahead, clearing the path. Back to Margaret's grave. No one spoke as we walked. Just the sound of dress shoes on gravel and the breeze cutting softly through the oaks. They led me back the way I'd come, 7 silent men in formation around an old soldier. No handcuffs now. No orders shouted. Just the slow walk of return. I didn't look at Morrison. I didn't need to. Whatever lesson he needed was already unfolding. The cemetery felt different now. Still quiet, still solemn. But no longer lonely. We passed rows of headstones like they were witnesses. No one else moved. The backup officers stood off to the side. Watching. One of them lowered his eyes when I passed. When we reached Margaret's grave, the youngest Marine, Rodriguez's corporal, I think, stepped ahead and adjusted the flowers that had been knocked over during the commotion. He didn't say a word. Just made them right again. I stood in front of her marker. My legs ached. My back throbbed. But I stayed upright. The men didn't crowd me. They stood at ease. Silent sentries, letting me have this. Tommy stood slightly behind me to the left. He didn't speak until I was ready. "I'm sorry, Sergeant," he said finally, his voice low. "This should never have happened." I didn't respond. Not with words. Just nodded once. He took a small folded envelope from his pocket and handed it to me. From the cemetery director. Official acknowledgement of visitation rights. And an apology. I took it. I wouldn't read it then. Maybe never. But I kept it in my pocket. Behind us, the other Marines had formed a subtle line. Not ceremonial. Just deliberate. Visible. Morrison stayed near his cruiser, talking with his radio. His voice was different now. Lower. Measured. Like he'd just realized this wasn't the job he thought it was. Eventually, the director arrived in person. A man named Caldwell. Mid-60s. Gray suit. He came down the gravel path like a man walking into confession. "Mr. Kemper," he said. "I'm so sorry. This was a grave oversight." He reached out to shake my hand. I offered it. Not out of obligation. But because he'd come himself. That still meant something. I should have briefed staff better. Your name was on the list. You were within your rights. This should not have been a confrontation. It was a goodbye, I said quietly. That's all. I understand. His voice faltered. And it won't happen again. We stood in silence a moment longer. Then he turned to the Marines. Thank you. All of you. Tommy spoke up. We don't leave our own behind. I looked down at Margaret Stone. The sun had lowered itself toward the treetops. The light was soft now, cutting sideways across the granite. Her name shimmered like a whisper. The Marines stood until I stepped back. Then, without a command, they adjusted formation. No salute. No ceremony. Just quiet presence. The kind that tells a story without saying a word. Before they left, Tommy turned to me again. You're not alone, he said. I nodded. Not today. He gave a half smile. Not ever, Sergeant. Then they walked away. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. I watched them disappear down the path, their backs straight, steps sure. And when I turned back to the grave, I didn't feel quite as hollow as I had that morning. 3 weeks passed. The flowers on Margaret's grave had withered, replaced now with a fresh bouquet I'd arranged myself. Chrysanthemums and daffodils, because she liked contrast. She said life should have both brightness and weight. I returned every Thursday. Early morning. Before the groundskeeper ran his mower. Before the sun had climbed high enough to cast shadows. But this time, I came with more than flowers. I'd spent 2 days writing them. 7 letters. Handwritten on paper from Margaret's desk drawer, stationery she used for birthdays and thank you notes. She liked the permanence of pen and paper. Each letter was different. Not flowery. Just real. To each man who stood with me that day, I gave what I could, my thanks. My story. A piece of memory that might remind them why it all matters. Tommy's letter was the longest. I wrote to him about that day at the VFW, how I'd noticed him noticing. I thanked him not just for arriving, but for doing so with silence and dignity. I told him he had reminded me of a kind of strength I thought had gone extinct. To the youngest Marine, I wrote about Margaret. I described her voice. Her favorite song. The way she used to fold our towels into thirds, like it meant something. I told him I hoped he'd find someone like her, someone who made the dark quieter. I drove the letters to the local detachment. Delivered them in person. No ceremony. Just an envelope with each name. The officer on duty took them like they were sacred, nodding once, no questions asked. Outside, the breeze moved through the flag out front. I sat in my truck a long time before I started the engine. There was no audience. No applause. But that day marked something different. Something repaired. I hadn't planned to go back to the VFW. Not after Margaret passed. But I did. I walked through the door in my usual suit, with my leg moving stiffly beneath me, and the same old silence on my face. But when I stepped in, the room went still. A few young ones stood. Tommy was among them. He said nothing. Just extended his hand. When I took it, I didn't feel like a relic. I felt seen. That night, over coffee instead of beer, I told them a few stories. Not the kind in history books. Just the kind that matter in the quiet. About Firewatch. About mail call. About Margaret's laugh echoing through a hospital room. I didn't stay late. Just long enough to be remembered. On the way home, the streets felt softer somehow. As if the town had shifted just slightly, less indifferent, more awake. I knew there'd be more days like the one at the cemetery. More men like Morrison. But now, I also knew there would always be those who stood up, not loudly, not with fists, but with presence. That was the legacy I believed in. Not medals. Not speeches. Just the kind of silence that says, I see you. You still matter. In a world quick to judge and slow to listen, the truth rarely needs to raise its voice. Sometimes it's the sound of handcuffs being unlocked beside a grave. Sometimes it's the slow unfolding of a letter, written in an old man's hand. Sometimes it's a prosthetic leg, set quietly on a table. Dignity, once defended, speaks for itself.